Good afternoon. Can I remind members that social distancing measures are in place in the chamber and across the Holyrood campus? And the first item of business is portfolio questions. And the first set of portfolio questions is Culture, Europe and External Affairs. I remind members that questions 2 and 7 have been grouped together, and if a member wishes to request a supplementary question, they should indicate so in the chat function, entering the letter R during the relevant question, please. During the relevant question, not before. And obviously, if you've got supplementaries to 2 or 7, after those questions have been asked. Question 1, James Dornan, please.
To ask the Scottish Government what progress has been made in its discussions with the UK Government regarding support for businesses in Scotland that have been impacted by Brexit.
Minister Graham Day, please.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government is deeply concerned by the emerging evidence of the severe impact that Brexit is having on the ability of Scottish businesses to trade effectively and competitively with the European Union, with lasting consequences for our economy. Scottish ministers are in daily contact with the UK ministers to press the need to support those businesses that are being adversely impacted. The Scottish Government will continue to work hard to address problems and blockages where it's in our power to do so. We will also continue to do all we can to ensure that businesses in Scotland have concrete, up-to-date information about the new arrangements through our Prepare for Brexit website and other resources.
James Dornan.
Thank the Minister for that answer. The EU has set up a Brexit Adjustment Reserve Fund to counter unforeseen and adverse consequences in member states and sectors that are worst affected by Brexit. While Scotland appears to be receiving no extra funding for this purpose, I understand that Ireland is set to receive around €1 billion in support. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that whilst the EU continues to show solidarity to its member states, the UK Government's insane Brexit strategy plus its continuing contempt for Scotland shows how much better Scotland will be when we rejoin the EU as an independent country?
Minister.
Presiding Officer, the disruption to the seafood sector in particular offers a very clear example of the delays, costs and devastating losses associated with becoming an EU third country and dealing with new and untested processes. The media report daily that many businesses will find their profit margins slashed by the new border and customs requirements. Others will simply close altogether. The member will be aware that the UK Government has announced a £23 million compensation scheme for UK businesses. After making repeated calls for it, we welcome this, but remain concerned it's little more than a sticking plaster. I'm also concerned about the scope of the scheme, which is designed to cover businesses that have suffered direct export losses that can be evidenced. It's essential further clarity is provided by the UK Government as soon as possible, and that timescales for applications and payments are made clear. The same goes for the previously announced £100 million fishing industry funding. But I absolutely concur with the member about the contempt that's being shown here, and also the merits and the need for Scotland to rejoin the EU.
Question 2, Colin Beattie.
To ask the Scottish Government what steps it has taken to continue positive collaboration with European countries following the UK's exit from the EU.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Russell. Cabinet Secretary, you're mute. I'm going to move on to question 3 and come back to questions 2 and 7. So I think that'd be the thing to do. Question 3, Liam MacArthur, please.
To ask the Scottish Government what support it will provide to the businesses and sectors most directly impacted by Brexit.
Minister.
Presiding Officer, as well as pressing for urgent streamlining and simplification of trade arrangements, the Scottish Government continues to call on the UK Government to introduce fair and meaningful support for businesses most affected by Brexit. Complex new procedures and untested systems are having a disastrous impact on the ability of Scottish businesses to trade effectively and competitively within the European Union, with lasting consequences. This is, of course, occurring at a time when business resilience is already severely stretched by COVID. The Scottish Government will continue to do everything we can to help businesses in a practical sense to address the immediate problems arising from Brexit, where, of course, it's within our power to do so.
Liam MacArthur.
Can I thank the Minister for that response? As you'll be aware, seafood exporters have faced some of the most serious problems since the turn of the year. In some respects, Orkney Fishermen's Society are fortunate. They ship frozen product and have loyal customers in France. doing all they can to help maintain supplies. But urgent steps are needed to reduce bureaucracy that serves no purpose, yet adds delay and burdens on staff and cash flow. Will the Minister therefore ask the Rural Secretary to look at how paperwork can be cut and processes made more efficient? In particular, can I urge the Government to look at what is required for catch certificates and invoicing, much of which serves no useful purpose whatsoever?
Minister.
President Officer, I didn't entirely catch all of this, but of course I'll ask the relevant Cabinet Secretary to respond to the member in detail. I think to answer his general point, however, the Scottish Government is committed to dealing with the practical aspects of this that we can have an impact on. We're providing through Food Standards Scotland, for example, some practical and pragmatic help to everyone who's affected by this. We're also using our enterprise agencies to assist wherever it's possible. But I'll absolutely undertake to get my colleague to respond directly to Liam McArthur on the points that he's raised.
A brief supplementary, Sandra White, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Minister, there have been recent reports regarding the UK Government advisers telling businesses that the best way to avoid border issues and VAT problems is to set up a new company within the EU single market. Does the Cabinet Secretary, the Minister, agree that the best way for Scotland to protect its businesses and their ability to trade is to rejoin the European Union?
Minister.
The member is absolutely right to highlight this issue. I mean, how ironic that a government who has created this book is trying to suggest ways to work around it. We absolutely recognise that the way to resolve this issue in the medium to long term is for Scotland to return to the European Union fold as an independent country.
I think we can now get the Cabinet Secretary, so now go to question 2, Colin Beattie.
To ask the Scottish Government what steps it has taken to continue positive collaboration with European countries following the UK's exit from the EU.
Cabinet Secretary.
I hope you can hear me now, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government, of course, rejects the isolationist and damaging approach of the UK Government's hard Brexit policy. We remain committed to European values and to working collaboratively with EU member states in line with the views of the people of Scotland. Despite Brexit, we continue to seek opportunities to collaborate in areas of mutual interest, such as climate change, just transition, hydrogen, green jobs, investment, education, and the well-being economy.
Colin Beattie.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his response. What further steps have been taken to ensure that EU residents living in Scotland continue to feel safe and welcome in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
The First Minister has, of course, indicated again her enthusiasm for continuing to welcome EU citizens to Scotland. It is a point that is stressed with the EU consuls and with the EU ambassadors on every occasion, and indeed the Minister for Migration, Jenny Gilruth, and myself spoke with consuls this very morning in one of our regular update sessions, and we will continue to do so. Let me be very clear, and I hope the Chamber will be clear, European citizens are very welcome to be in Scotland, to stay in Scotland, and we wish them here when we rejoin the EU, as we will.
Question 7, Julia Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it will maintain close ties between Scotland and EU member states now that the UK has exited from the EU.
Cabinet Secretary. Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government, of course, deeply regrets the fact and the manner of the UK's exit. It's more important, therefore, than ever we continue to engage with EU institutions and member states. We're determined to maintain our close ties with our EU neighbours, with whom we have such close political, social and economic relationships. The commitment is being delivered in a range of ways, including using our network of offices in Europe, in Berlin, Brussels, Dublin, London and Paris, who work to promote Scottish interests and strengthen our relations, continue to demonstrate values of cooperation, democracy, equality and the rule of law, as we pave the way for Scotland's return to the EU as an equal, independent member state. And we'll continue to celebrate our culture with others, as last night I did in the whisky tasting and burn celebration with EU ambassadors hosted by Scotland House in London.
Gillian Martin.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, and I am pleased to hear what he has said. Keeping pace with standards in terms of environment, employment, human rights, and the maintenance of close trading ties with the EU member states is going to be fundamental to Scotland's future. In these early stages of our exit from the EU, is there any indication that the Scottish Government ministers are going to be involved directly in continued negotiations with the EU as the UK Government irons out outstanding and continued issues arising from our departure?
Cabinet Secretary.
There are, of course, a plethora of arrangements put in place by the UK to continue dialogue with the EU. But unfortunately, we have not had notification of our involvement in any of them. And indeed, there has not been a meeting since the end of the arrangement, December the 31st, in which we have been told about those issues. And I think it is very important now that we press our case on those issues and, of course, have our own direct conversation. Scotland is not mute, and Scotland is well recognised within the EU. And therefore, we need to make sure that we have dialogue directly and also, of course, make sure that we attempt to influence what is taking place elsewhere.
Brief supplementary, Dean Lockhart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In terms of the ongoing trading relationships with our EU partners, can the Cabinet Secretary confirm that the vast majority of the SNP's trade offices in Europe, which he mentioned, are located at British embassies and consulates? And does he agree with me that this joint working and sharing resource with the UK Government is a good example of working together with the rest of the UK?
Cabinet Secretary.
To work with others, we will do so, but I wouldn't take location to indicate assent. Quite clearly, we have different priorities and different views. It is perfectly possible to have that, to work alongside other people, but to seek one's own opportunities and advantages. I'm sure the Conservatives recognise that, and certainly I recognise that. To try and to read into this situation some deep satisfaction with the UK would be foolish self-delusion.
Question 4, Linda Fabiani.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with EU member states following the end of the Brexit transition period.
Cabinet Secretary.
As I have just indicated, Presiding Officer, despite the UK Government's disastrous Brexit policy, we continue to retain close links and will go on doing so. The Scottish Government has participated in a number of discussions with European partners at ministerial and official level, both bilaterally and multilaterally in recent weeks. A number of those discussions have been focused on measures we're taking in the short term to protect trade and critical supply chains, reduce the risk of disruption of goods and people crossing borders, which has been a feature of the last few weeks because of the actions of the UK Tory party, supported by the Tory party in the Scottish Parliament, and also to provide as much information, advice and support as possible to EU citizens in Scotland who have also been discriminated against by the Tory party in Scotland and in the UK.
Linda Fabiani.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary, for that answer. And it's very clear from the post-Brexit experience that Scotland is already suffering very particular disadvantages. Fishing, seafood, agriculture, just a few examples of that. There have obviously been discussions in partnership with Wales about the Erasmus education programme, which I hope will soon bear fruit. Is there scope for constructive discussion directly with EU member states on other very Scotland-specific issues?
Cabinet Secretary. Cabinet Secretary.
There is indeed scope for those discussions, and I welcome Linda Fabiani's mention of them. I'm very strongly in support of my colleague Richard Lochhead and his Welsh colleague in what they're doing on Erasmus. And I want to say a particular thank you to those members, many members of the European Parliament, who have written a letter in support. That, I think, shows not just the affection with which Scotland is held, but the respect with which our educational institutions and youth work activities are held. And we will continue looking for those opportunities to have direct dialogue on matters of concern. Of course, that is a preliminary to our desire to re-enter the EU.
Question 5, Bob Doris.
Can I ask the Scottish Government what impact European structural funds have had on the Glasgow, Maryhill and Springburn constituency in the last 15 years?
Minister Jenny Gilruth.
European structural funding has had a significant positive social and economic impact both nationally and locally within Bob Doris's constituency. Approximately £11 million has been invested through the current 2014 to 2020 European funding programme to support individuals into meaningful employment and in supporting businesses across Glasgow. An additional £2 million has also been invested from the programme to support the installation of new, affordable, low-carbon heating systems within social housing developments in Glasgow.
Bob Doris.
I thank the Minister for that answer. And I know very well the benefit European structural funds have had, not just my constituency, but right across Scotland, with an estimated €944 million invested in the last 7 years. Does the Minister share my concerns that the UK Government's planned replacements, the so-called shared prosperity and levelling up funds, may very well mean both less financial support coming to Glasgow and indeed Scotland as a result of the UK Government's post-Brexit stance on structural funds, but also may mean less democratic control and influence as the UK Government, unlike the European Union, is intent on bypassing the Scottish Government?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The decision by the UK Government to bypass the Scottish Government in the development and the rollout of the Shared Prosperity Fund demonstrates a complete disregard towards devolution. The UK Government has kept us at arm's length throughout the whole process. They have provided no clarity on the fund's objectives and delivery plans, and no evidence as to why a clearly devolved matter should no longer be run or administered in Scotland. In respecting the devolution agreement, the Scottish Government is best placed to ensure that replacement funding is allocated to meet the needs of Scotland. Ignoring the devolution agreement puts at risk all that we have achieved.
Question 6, Sandra White.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what representations it has made to the UK Government and the EU regarding the extension of visa-free travel to the EU to professionals that are not currently exempt.
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Freedom of movement has benefited Scotland, our economy, our culture and our communities. The ending of that freedom is already causing real difficulties. On the 14th of January, the Cabinet Secretary for the Economy, Fair Work and Culture wrote to the UK Immigration Minister, highlighting the impact of those working in our cultural and creative sectors, calling on the UK Government to seek extensive reciprocal mobility arrangements with the EU for those working in these sectors and seeking an urgent meeting. The Scottish Government and this Parliament has been clear that the UK immigration system does not meet Scotland's distinct needs. It is deeply regrettable that the UK Immigration Minister has refused on numerous occasions now for meetings with Scottish Government ministers to discuss Scotland's unique migration needs.
Sandra White.
I thank the Minister for that reply. The Minister will be very aware of the culture in my Kelvin constituency, and in particular Celtic Connections, which this year obviously has been slightly different. But Celtic Connections opens its arms out to thousands of artists throughout Europe, and obviously it's reciprocal from artists in Scotland going to Europe also, particularly musicians. Can I ask if the Scottish Government has had any discussions with the UK Government or the EU in regards to being able to get some form of transition period even for these fantastic cultural events, and also the musicians and the people who take part in it being able to travel freely in Europe?
Minister.
Thank you. I enjoyed watching Blazing Fiddles and Admiral Fowl this weekend as part of the virtual Celtic Connections Festival this year, and I know how important the festival is to Sandra White's constituency. In February last year, the Scottish Government hosted an International Festivals Visa Summit in Edinburgh, where we explored the challenges faced by festivals and identified a range of solutions. We put those solutions to the UK Government, but as yet have not received any satisfactory response. As previously mentioned, on the 14th of January, the Cabinet Secretary for the Economy wrote to the UK Government Minister for Migration on this issue. As of today, we have not yet received a reply to that letter, and at the very least, from a Scottish Government perspective, the UK Government should expand the permitted paid engagement visa for 4 weeks to 6 months, as well as extending and clarifying the activities that this route permits. The Scottish Government has provided £10,000 to Arts InfoPoint UK, a point pilot mobility system which will provide support to artists coming into the UK with advice on issues like visa applications, tax and social security. But this situation is as a direct result of a political choice by the UK Government, and it is imperative, therefore, that the UK Government sorts out a solution with the EU.
Brief supplementary, Beatrice Wishart, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As Sandra White's already alluded to, new complicated arrangements and additional costs make planning harder for established musicians who want to work in Europe, never mind for those who are starting out, as well as for international musicians who want to come to Scotland for events like the Shetland Folk Festival. Will the Scottish Government work to help produce accessible guidance for musicians trying to navigate new processes at home and abroad?
Minister.
I think that seems like a sensible and reasonable suggestion from the member, and I'll certainly take that away today, and I will write to her on that matter as well regarding the work on that issue.
Thank you very much for the brevity. Question 8, Rachel Hamilton.
To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to recent comments about Scottish independence by Spain's former Prime Minister, Mariano Rajoy.
Cabinet Secretary.
I am unaware of recent comments by Mr Rajoy, aware of past comments, although there have, of course, been a range of positive comments from people across the European Union who recognise and support Scotland's continued commitment to shared EU values. They know that Scotland occupies a unique position as a country in a voluntary union of nations within the UK that has been removed from the EU against its will, and that the people of Scotland therefore have the right to choose their own future and escape the disastrous hard Brexit that the Conservative Party and Rachel Hamilton has been so keen to force upon them.
Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you. I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. I will enlighten him as to what Mr Rajoy said. He said, I want to be very clear, Scotland does not have the competence to negotiate with the European Union, a view echoed by many other European politicians. Does the Cabinet Secretary accept that Scotland would be rejected from membership of the EU due to its current deficit of 8.6% of GDP? In order to bring down that deficit, a strict programme of austerity would have to be adopted with increased taxes and cuts to public spending, on top of the already dire post-pandemic outlook. Not only that, the euro would potentially have to be adopted. Has the Cabinet Secretary been clear with the people of Scotland about these criteria?
Can I ask members not to mumble? I'm trying to hear over the connections that are here. Cabinet Secretary, please.
Presiding Officer, I'm not sure which is worse, the farage of rubbish that we have just heard from the member, or her clear delight that there might be a way in which her fellow citizens could not take their full place on the world stage. It is extraordinary that Tories continue to salivate on these matters. I think she also fails to understand the language of diplomacy. It is quite correct to say that at the present moment, Scotland does not have the competence to negotiate with the EU because Scotland does not have legal personality. However, if Scotland chooses to be independent, it is the independence of Scotland that allows it then to enter into those negotiations. So I think her excitement, her visible excitement at a negative about the country in which she lives may be diminished when she actually understands what has been said.
Thank you. That concludes questions on Constitution, Europe and External Affairs. We now move on to questions on economy, fair work and culture. I remind members that questions 5 and 7 have been grouped together. The usual, if you want to ask a supplementary, put R in the chat function when that question is being asked. And with regard to questions 5 and 7, you wait for the answers to 5 and 7 before you come in for a supplementary. Question 1, Gil Patterson.
Many thanks, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on its engagement with trade unions and the UK Government regarding workers' rights post-Brexit.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
We are committed to fair work and do not want to see any reduction in workers' rights or protections that were secured under EU membership. Last week, the First Minister and the STUC issued a joint call to the UK Government to preserve the protections enshrined in the Working Time Directive, and we're committed to working with trade unions to protect the health and well-being of the workforce. We continue to engage with the UK Government on their plans around post-Brexit labour reforms, including the planned employment bill, taking every opportunity to promote our progressive fair work agenda. And our ability to tackle unfair working practices and fully protect our workers' rights is limited by the fact that employment law is reserved to Westminster, and will continue to do all that we can to promote fair work within the powers we have while calling for the devolution of employment law.
Gil Patterson.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her answer? It is concerning, is it not, that the news that the UK Government is reviewing how EU employment rights protections could be changed after Brexit. We only have to look at our fishing industry to see that it is clear that they will break any promise and sell out any group of workers, no matter the cost. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that when it comes to protecting workers' rights, the Tories simply can't be trusted?
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government rejects any regression in worker protections. It will be no surprise that I agree with the member
I have raised concerns directly with the UK Government's Business Minister, Paul Scully, in a meeting last week. I've written to the new Secretary of State for Business, Kwasi Kwarteng, on this and other issues. And although the UK Government may say it's about cutting regulations and red tape without affecting workers' protections, it's those self-same regulations that provide the protections that workers need. It would be naive to believe that a UK Government review of EU workers' rights will automatically lead to better protection for workers, particularly given, as he says, the broken Brexit promises that we've seen recently. And it's just more evidence that full powers over employment should be transferred to the Scottish Government so that the Scottish Parliament can set the priorities that benefit those living in Scotland. And let me be clear, this presents the greatest risk to workers' rights since the introduction of the Trade Union Act, and will continue to work with trade unions to protect workers' rights from a race to the bottom in standards.
Question 2, Emma Harper.
To ask the Scottish Government, in light of increased restrictions on businesses due to COVID-19, what direction and guidance it offers to local authorities regarding using discretionary business support funding.
Cabinet Secretary.
The use of this funding is entirely at the discretion of local authorities based on the specific needs of their local economies. However, local authorities requested guidance on how this funding should be distributed while giving them the set flexibility to use their local knowledge to support businesses. We worked closely with COSLA in developing that guidance, which has now been established and shared with local authorities.
Emma Harper.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. I have had a number of cases locally where the local authority could have used discretionary funding to provide lifeline support, but opted not to. Given this, can I ask whether the Scottish Government could consider giving further direction or developing a framework for the local authorities to ensure that the discretionary funding is going to the bank accounts of those who have fallen through the cracks and need it most?
Cabinet Secretary.
Giving local authorities autonomy to spend their allocations based on the eligibility criteria which they have developed in response to the assessment of needs within their local economies is a principle which underpins this discretionary fund, and it would be inappropriate for the Scottish Government to mandate where local authorities direct this financial support. At the request of local authorities, the Government did issue non-strategy guidance to local authorities to support them in distributing this funding, and this established that getting financial support to businesses that haven't received other forms of direct funding from the Scottish Government since October is an important principle of this fund.
Brief supplementary, Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. The SNP said they aim to make business support payments within 10 working days. So why are businesses now waiting over 3 months to receive those?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think the member is referring to the original grants that were established, a very simple system that existed back in March and April. In terms of the distribution of funds, as I know we'll come on to in later questions, there has been significant payments in the last few days and the last few weeks for the January payments. That will be welcomed by many businesses. And instead of attacking local authorities and councils, their hard work in distributing these funds, perhaps they should recognise the contribution they've made in getting £3 billion worth of support that's been allocated to businesses, processed, planned for and ready for distribution, the bulk of it already distributed.
Question 3, Daniel Johnson.
To ask the Scottish Government how it plans to make staff and customers aware of measures that are proposed to prevent assaults on retail workers.
Minister Jamie Hepburn.
The Scottish Government works closely with trade unions and retail organisations through their membership of the Retail Working Group that co-produced the coronavirus retail sector guidance, which includes advice on assessing risk, security and employee health and wellbeing. Trade unions, retail businesses and organisations are also represented in the Retail Strategy Steering Group, which met for the first time on the 20th of January. In partnership with Crime Stoppers, Fearless and the Scottish Grocers Federation, we are developing an information awareness campaign that will highlight the real impact that threats, abuse and violence has on retail workers. The campaign will ask people to think about how they interact with retail workers and encourage anyone experiencing this unacceptable behaviour to report it to the police or through Crime Stoppers or Fearless. The initial phase will run from February 21 to March 2021, and again later in the year prior to the commencement of the forthcoming legislation.
Daniel Johnson.
I thank the Minister for that answer, and I am, of course, very pleased that my bill passed last week. But my real concern is that the social distancing and other measures, which we're also aware of how critical they are causing real problems for retail workers now. ASDA estimate that acts of violence and abuse against retail workers have doubled as a result of the pandemic. So I would ask what specific measures are being brought forward by the government to help retail workers implement these social distancing measures and to make customers aware that they must comply with them.
Minister.
Well, in addition to the retail guidance that I referred to, the same group also created customer guidance, and let me quote from the customer guidance. It says very clearly to customers that they should behave. Abusive behaviour will not be tolerated, and at its worst it could constitute criminality. That's a message we must constantly reinforce to the public now. By and large, the public are, I believe, adhering with the restrictions that are in place. They are respecting those working in retail settings, but we know, as Daniel Johnson has suggested, there are some who are not. We have to collectively reinforce the message that that is not acceptable. We work with our trade union partners to continue to communicate that message. We'll continue to do so, and indeed the campaign I've mentioned in my answer will also have a role to play in that regard.
Question 4, Mark Griffin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how its Fair Work agenda can help it to take a collaborative and partnership approach to working with workers and trade unions during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Minister.
The Scottish Government is committed to working with our trade union partners as we respond to the pandemic. In July, the Cabinet Secretary for Economy, Fair Work and Culture issued a joint statement with the STUC and other partner organisations reaffirming our shared commitment to fair work. Ministers engage regularly with the STUC and affiliates to help manage the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis on workers and in workplaces, including a weekly meeting attended by me and a Minister for Older People and Equalities. The First Minister also has a biennial meeting with the STUC affiliates, the most recent of which was held on the 18th of January. Through our flagship Fair Work First approach, we're asking employers to adopt fair work practices, including providing appropriate channels for effective worker voice, such as trade union recognition.
Mark Griffin.
Thank the Minister for that answer. Teachers, retail workers and transport workers, all key workers, have continued to do their jobs in high-risk settings this year, with many fallen ill and too many dying as a result. A number of trade unions, GMB, USDA and EIS, to name a few, have called on the Government to vaccinate those on the front line. Can I ask Minister if he's having those discussions in those meetings that he set out with trade unions, if those calls are being heard, and that the Government is looking closely at prioritising workers who are at higher risk of contracting the virus in the workplace?
Minister.
The short answer is, I can tell Mark Griffin and other members, yes, we have discussed these matters. I think in discussing them, the STUC and affiliates have understood that we have to work through the GCVI priority list, but thereafter, of course, there is a discussion about how we move into the next phase. That discussion is happening and that discussion will continue, and I can assure Mr Griffin that the voices of trade unions are being heard in that regard.
Brief supplementary, Alec Rowley.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Unite Trade Union has raised directly with Government the issue of construction workers not being able to work in a safe environment. I've certainly had lots of people raise that with me, construction workers. Is the Government looking at this?
Minister.
Well, again, I can say to Mr Rowley that this is an issue that we have discussed. Of course, what we're seeking to do is balance the various harms to the economy. I'm sure he will recognise we also are dealing with economic harms and want to facilitate economic activity where it is safe to do so. What I can tell him is that Health and Safety Executive has reported only 2 incidents within construction that relate to outbreaks. I can say, and I'll freely say, that Unite have raised other concerns with me, and what I have requested of them is that they provide that information to us, because if there are incidents happening out there, then it is incumbent that we hear them. We do not want workers to be working in unsafe conditions, and if there is evidence presented that we need to consider, then of course we'll do so.
Question 5, Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the distribution of COVID-19 business support funding.
Cabinet Secretary.
Since the start of the pandemic, the Scottish Government has allocated over £3 billion to help businesses. This includes 383,000 business support awards totalling £2.3 billion between March and the beginning of October 2020. More than 90% of the funds allocated to business support since October are now live, with the bulk of funding to support businesses affected by the legal restrictions under the strategic framework levels. In addition to January's strategic framework grant payment, retail and leisure businesses have now received additional funding of £9,000 and up to £25,000 per premises for hospitality businesses. We anticipate approximately 50,000 business premises are currently eligible to apply to the Strategic Framework Business Fund. And that means that in the first month of this year, over a third of the consequentials have now been paid out, with the bulk of the remaining two-thirds consequentials available to help businesses required to close over the next 2 months. This includes a number of bespoke schemes for specific sectors, with 3 of these schemes launched in the last week.
Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. McLaren Vending Limited is a family-run business operating in Scotland since 1963, and its application for business support funds were refused by Glasgow City Council. Director Paul McLaren says, "If no help is provided, I can see no path other than unnecessary job losses." Will the Cabinet Secretary agree to look at support for this family business as well as the wider vending sector?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, clearly, I don't know the background to the individual application, and indeed, I think as a local MSP, he can take that up directly in his constituency capacity with Glasgow City Council. The reason we have the discretionary fund is to enable support, particularly for supply chains. I think the business he's described sounds as if it's a supply chain to the hospitality sector. So although they're legally not required to close, their demand for their product will have been limited. That's one of the reasons the discretionary fund was established, to enable that kind of support. So if he hasn't done so, I would encourage him to do so. But clearly, if he writes to me, I can also contact the City Council to understand how they're applying their discretionary funds and whether wholesalers or suppliers in this kind of context would be revisited in terms of their consideration.
Question 7, Finlay Carson.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the support being provided to businesses that have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Cabinet Secretary.
In January alone, we've launched our £57 million taxi and private hire fund, the £6 million Scotland Inbound Tour Operators Fund, the £25 million Wedding Fund, the £4 million Grassroots Music Venue Stabilisation Fund, and paid out the majority, as I've just said, of our hospitality, retail and leisure top-ups. This is in addition to the ongoing support paid out through the Strategic Framework Business Fund. And yesterday we announced additional support for breweries, travel agents and indoor football centres. Funding for mobile service providers, newly self-employed people and for tourism and culture organisations will also be provided this month.
Finlay Carson.
Thank you for that response. So why is this SNP government adopting a rigid and unfair criteria towards Scotland's 15,500 self-catering businesses, denying them business-saving grants of £6,000, while their counterparts in other parts of the UK have received top-up grants as high as 21,500? According to the Association of Scotland Self-Caterers, there's been a lack of clarity and inadequate guidelines provided by the government. Given that pubs and restaurants get a £6,000 top-up on top of their FSBF, why is this not being extended to the self-catering sector?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the member will be aware that there's £104 million been allocated to tourism and hospitality. The self-catering sector will have funding available to them. There will be additional £10,000, I understand, available for larger self-catering establishments. Of course, they're also eligible with the legal restrictions to the regular strategic framework funding, and those that have been closed, for example, during that period of November, December and indeed January, depending on their size, could have received, in addition to that, several thousand, perhaps, if you're looking at some of the figures, up to another £9,000. Now, that won't necessarily apply to each of the individual self-catering companies that he might have in his constituency, but that funding is available, and Fergus Ewing, as the Tourism Secretary, is championing the cause in case of self-catering to ensure they get the support that they require to sustain their position so that they can reopen when the market improves.
Brief supplementary, Colin Beattie.
It's very welcome that the Scottish Government is working to ensure that targeted support is available to sectors facing ongoing challenges, such as the wedding sector. Can the Cabinet Secretary provide any further information as to the types of businesses in the supply chain which may be eligible for this support?
Cabinet Secretary.
So, as the member is aware, in recognition of the ongoing challenges faced by the wedding sector, a further £10 million has been added to the original £15 million announced in December. So it's being launched and made available tomorrow, the 28th of January, as well as providing one-off grants of up to £25,000 for eligible businesses in the sector impacted by the restrictions. Areas like wedding venues, photographers, caterers and suppliers will be able to apply, and the three enterprise agencies, South of Scotland Enterprise, Scottish Enterprise and Highlands and Islands Enterprise, will be administering them.
Question 6, Maurice Corrie.
And to ask the Scottish Government, in light of the impact of COVID-19 on the economy, what efforts it has made to raise awareness among businesses of the support available to assist them in employing veterans where vacancies match their skills and experience.
Minister.
Through Community Jobs Scotland, the Scottish Government supports third sector employers to recruit ex-service personnel. The Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations, which delivers the programme on behalf of the Scottish Government, works closely with these employers to promote the available opportunities. Furthermore, the Veterans Employability Strategic Group was refreshed in 2020 with 2 new co-chairs considering a new and ambitious purpose. The group will continue to build on its partnership approach to employability and skills. Working in collaboration, it will identify and strengthen pathways into employment for our service leavers and veterans, identifying ways to promote the values, skills and attributes they bring to workplaces. This includes developing the relationship between the Career Transition Partnership and Skills Development Scotland to avoid service leavers falling between the gaps, ensuring they have seamless access to SDS during and once their support from the Career Transition Partnership ends.
Maurice Corrie.
I thank the Minister for his answer. Given the uncertainty facing the labour market, what progress is the Government undertaking to further engage with both small and medium-sized businesses and local authorities to create and better support mentorships and training programmes to target the skills and shortages gaps, particularly for the British Armed Forces veterans?
Minister.
Well, I assure Mr Corrie that I'm in regular engagement with Scotland's business community through the various business organisations, and this is a matter that I'm always happy to discuss with them. Of course, we continue to lead by example, having offered veterans and service leavers fixed terms appointments ourselves and appointed a number of ex-service personnel with fixed term appointments last year to help respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we very much lead from the front and will continue to work with and encourage employers across the country to follow that lead.
Question 8, Bruce Crawford.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what consideration it is giving to providing further support to painters and decorators and food production and distribution companies, for example, in light of the COVID-19 restrictions.
Minister.
The £30 million discretionary fund is specifically designed to target small businesses and the self-employed who have not received direct financial support through other Scottish Government financial support schemes, such as supply chains. We've also committed £50 million for the newly self-employed people to mitigate the financial challenges for those who have been unable to access the UK Government's self-employed income support scheme.
Bruce Crawford.
Can I thank the Minister for his reply? Is the Minister aware that the SNP-led Stirling Council is one of the first, if not the first, council in Scotland to open up their discretionary business fund to applications, and Robbie joined me in welcoming this development? But in regard to the Strategic Framework Restriction Fund, will the Scottish Government consider refining its objectives to include those businesses who have yet to receive financial support despite significantly modifying their operations, simply survive, but have not been told to do so by law?
Minister.
Well, let me join with Bruce Crawford in welcoming and congratulating Stirling Council in getting the scheme up and running. We have asked a tremendous amount of local government, working with them, of course, but to deliver various forms of support schemes across the period of the pandemic, and the way they have responded has been tremendous, and it's good to hear that they are up and running in Stirling. Of course, the discretionary fund scheme is very much designed to support those businesses who may not be eligible for other forms of support. So I would, of course, make the point that some of the businesses he is referring to in his supplementary question should be looking to that as a source of funding. But in terms of his, the fundamental of his question, of course, we continue to consider the applicability and the operation of all of our forms of support, and these things will remain under constant review.
Thank you. That concludes questions on economy, fair work and culture, and I'll move straight on to the final set of portfolio questions, which is on education and skills. Question number 1, Joanne Lamont.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what analysis it undertook during the first COVID-19 lockdown regarding pupil engagement and how the findings affected its decisions regarding the current years.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government published an equity audit on the 13th of January 2021. This work, drawing on international research as well as an in-depth study of 54 schools across Scotland, assessed the impacts of school closures against a number of factors with a particular focus on children from disadvantaged backgrounds. The findings provide clear indicators for supporting children and young people in the phase of remote learning and in planning for their return to schools. Alongside the publication of the equity audit, I announced a new package of £45 million of support to help local authorities deal with the challenges of remote learning. Her Majesty's Inspectors of Education have also developed a national overview of practice in the delivery of remote learning through engagement with local authorities, schools, parents and children and young people. The first review was published on the 22nd of January, and these reviews will continue throughout the period of remote learning.
Joanne Lamont.
Thank you. I'm sure the Cabinet Secretary accepts that the closure of schools has a disproportionate impact on disadvantaged young people, and the consequences in attainment will be huge if action is not taken to tackle the scale of inequality within education that this pandemic is reinforcing. The Cabinet Secretary has outlined some of the steps he took, but I wonder if he's assessed fully the lack of engagement where it was highest, geographically in terms of needs, and what resources, particularly extra teachers and support staff, are now being targeted on making real contact with these groups in order not just to encourage the young people to engage with remote learning, but also to understand and address the causes of this lack of involvement.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, some of the factors that Joanne Lamont highlights are factors with which we wrestle on a constant basis in the education system to ensure that young people from disadvantaged backgrounds are able to secure the necessary engagement in their learning. And on that point, I unreservedly agree with Joanne Lamont that engagement in learning is a fundamental part of how we ensure that we support young people to overcome the disadvantages that they face. Part of the strategy that we adopt is about ensuring that schools are well supported to engage with their learners. That is why we've put in place 2 separate tranches of financial support. The first, which secured the recruitment of over 1,400 new teachers within our schools, and the second, which is to give flexibility to local authorities to either recruit staff or to enhance connectivity or to support other aspects of family-based learning to ensure that young people are engaged to sustain their learning. So these 2 different tranches of financial support are designed to address the very real issues that Joanne Lamont raises, and which I'm determined to tackle, because without that we will see further growth in the attainment gap, which is the opposite of what the government is trying to do.
Brief supplementary, Jamie Green.
Thank you. The Cabinet Secretary will be aware of serious concerns over how teachers are expected to produce estimated grades or perform remote assessments whilst remote learning continues. So can I ask why full guidance on this is still not forthcoming to teachers? And what exactly is the SQA doing differently this year so we don't see a repeat of last year's exams fiasco?
Cabinet Secretary.
The first point I want to make is that the SQA were asked, as a consequence of the Priestley Review, to engage the whole education system in developing guidance to ensure that there was whole system buy-in to the approach that we take in these difficult circumstances. I think any casual observation of the process would indicate that the SQA have done exactly that. And they chair the National Qualifications Group, which involves local authorities, directors of education, professional associations and Colleges Scotland, to make sure that the approach that we take is not just something that is created by the SQA, but which is bought into by the whole education system. So I suggest that Mr Green acquaints himself with the approaches that have been taken in the light of the Priestley Review. The second point I would make is that guidance has been given about the alternative certification model to the education system. And we are, of course, wrestling with the challenges that come with the onset of remote learning, which, of course, has only recently happened in the course of January. Earlier on today, the National Qualifications Group indicated that there would be more time offered to enable the formulation of estimates by teachers to be undertaken, and the deadline for receipt of these estimates has now been put back until the 18th of June to maximise the available time for both learning and teaching, and also for assessment of achievement of learning that can then underpin certification for young people, which I'm determined to ensure takes place in this school year.
Question 2, Keith Brown.
To ask the Scottish Government what percentage of children and young people are accessing places at school and nursery during the current lockdown period?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the number of children and young people attending schools and childcare services fluctuates on a daily basis. However, the latest figures show that on Monday, the 25th of January 2021, there were around 7% of pupils estimated to be physically attending local authority schools. This equates to around 50,000 children and young people. On Tuesday, the 19th of January 2021, responses to a survey from around half of childcare providers showed that there were at least 18,500 children attending a childcare setting.
Keith Brown.
Can I thank the Deputy First Minister for his answer? The guidance advises that the number of children taking up these places in schools during the strict lockdown period should be kept to the absolute minimum necessary. And advice to employers is to think critically about what staff they consider to be key workers, and to ruthlessly prioritise those providing absolutely essential services to the public in these emergency times. I have, however, been contacted by constituents whose employers are requiring them to attend work when they could work from home, as well as employers who are refusing furlough to allow parents to keep their children at home. Would the Deputy First Minister join with me in urging all employers to be as flexible as possible with their employees, allowing them to work at home whenever possible, and to utilise the furlough scheme, ensuring that as many people as possible can stay at home, protect the NHS and save lives during this lockdown period?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I agree wholeheartedly with Keith Brown's point. It is essential that we keep the numbers attending schools to the absolute minimum to ensure that we are doing everything we can to suppress the circulation of the virus. That requires deep engagement by employers, and I would encourage employers to exercise the maximum flexibility to enable their staff to work from home, to reduce the number of children that have to be in our schools and early learning settings. And if we do that, then we will be able to return to a much more familiar pattern of life in our society, because we will have successfully suppressed the virus, which is the key objective of the strategy we are pursuing today.
Brief supplementary, Claire Baker.
Thank you. 2 weeks ago, I asked the Cabinet Secretary about attendance in schools, in particular ASN schools, but I'm still receiving concerns from teachers and support staff about perceived health risks and safety. The Cabinet Secretary said he was looking at the data daily. Can I ask if this is on an educational authority basis, And what evidence would support a move to more blended learning?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I do look at the data on a local authority basis, and we are able to see the patterns of attendance in individual areas. I think the question that Claire Baker raises is an important question, because quite clearly any circumstance in which children are attending school must be safe for everyone concerned, staff and pupils alike. And we are exploring, as we have confirmed to Parliament, arrangements for ASN staff to be part of the cohort of health and social care workers that are vaccinated because of the similarity of the roles that they perform. And these issues are being taken forward within government. So I assure Claire Baker that these questions are being looked at very carefully to make sure that there is a safe approach for everybody concerned. As I indicated in some of my comments in the course of the last few days, we are looking at the arrangements for the return of additional support needs pupils, because quite clearly there will be a number of scenarios in which it would be better for pupils with additional support needs to be in a school setting, and we're evaluating and considering how we can do that on a safe basis.
Question 3, Lewis MacDonald.
To ask the Scottish Government what arrangements are in place for supply teachers during the current lockdown period.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the recruitment and employment of supply teachers in local authority schools are matters for individual councils. The Scottish Government has already provided £80 million of additional investment in education staff, sufficient for the recruitment of around 1,400 additional teachers and 200 support staff this year. Last week, I announced a package of £45 million of new funding to support the delivery of remote learning. The new funding can be used to recruit further staff, which might include teachers, classroom assistants, administrative staff, homeschool link workers or other support workers. I would therefore expect more supply teachers to be recruited where they are needed to do so.
Lewis MacDonald.
Unfortunately, the evidence from my constituents is that that is not happening, and the concern, I think, is that while there was a job retention scheme for supply teachers in the first lockdown, there is no such arrangement in place in the current lockdown. Will the Cabinet Secretary discuss this matter with the Scottish Negotiating Committee for Teachers with a view to ensuring that supply teachers who are not able to obtain employment are protected from the drastic loss of income that they otherwise face? Cabinet Secretary.
I will ensure that these issues are discussed with the SNCT, and I'm conscious that there have been discussions on this subject already or are scheduled to be. And the point I would make to Lewis MacDonald is that I am very troubled to hear of the experience that he is raising there. And I would appreciate if he would provide me with further details of that so that I can pursue it. I can see absolutely no reason why there would not be opportunities for supply teachers in the current context where we are doing everything we can to expand the teaching workforce. And indeed, at the last meeting of the Education Recovery Group, one of the directors of education present made a plea for any available supply teachers to be, and I use the words of the Director of Education, pointed in their direction, quite simply because they are keen to maximise their teaching workforce. So if Mr MacDonald has evidence which is contrary to that approach, I would welcome seeing that so that I can take steps to make sure that supply teachers can have opportunities to engage in teaching during these difficult times.
Question 4, Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what support it has put in place to help teachers deliver homeschooling during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, as well as a range of support that has been in place throughout the pandemic through GLOW and the National e-Learning Offer, Education Scotland has hosted several drop-in sessions in January to support practitioners in their planning and preparation for remote learning. Since March, over 7,500 practitioners have engaged in over 130 webinars delivered by Education Scotland digital officers, focusing on the delivery and creation of online learning. Scotland Learns also continues to be updated with new learning activities and materials for practitioners to support at-home learning during this time. In addition, Education Scotland has provided a named contact for every head teacher in Scotland allowing head teachers to have easy access to a single point of contact who can quickly point them in the direction of Education Scotland resources, guidance, or the team best placed to provide the support that they require.
Brian Whittle.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response, but we've had teachers raising with us issues such as a lack of IT equipment and the challenge of homeschooling their own children who are trying to teach their pupils, or even problems keeping in touch with pupils with special needs. So can I ask what further support can the Scottish Government give to teachers to tackle these specific issues?
Cabinet Secretary.
The Government has taken a number of steps to ensure that schools are well supported. We've, as I've indicated in my earlier answers, put in place tranches of new funding, firstly of £80 million to recruit 1,400 more teachers and 200 support staff, and then £45 million to give flexibility to local authorities to enable them to provide support to those who need it within the education system, whether that's around the provision of devices, connectivity, or additional teaching resources. And indeed, the Government has also provided £25 million to support the connectivity of about 70,000 pupils within the education system. Now, I noticed some feedback from Fife Council, if my memory was correct, where they indicated in response to some media coverage that any teacher that did not have appropriate connectivity would be provided with a device by Fife Council. And I can't see why any other local authority around the country wouldn't be in a position to provide that assistance to enable teachers to fulfil their teaching complement. But if there are specific examples that are troubling Mr Whittle, if he'd be so good as to write to me about them, I will certainly pursue them with the relevant local authority.
Brief supplementary. Ian Gray, please.
Thank you very much. The Education Scotland report published last Friday, which Mr Swinney referred to earlier, points out that while councils have provided many learners with personal devices, all councils are experiencing challenges around sufficiency and supply of information and computing technology resources, including devices and Wi-Fi access. So the support that has been put in place is not enough, not reported in the media, but by Education Scotland. What will the Deputy First Minister do to address this?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, there's a number of things that we've done already. We have put in place, having gone through a data collection exercise with local government, which identified 70,000 pupils who had digital connectivity issues. We put in place resources to tackle that, and that issue has been addressed. We are aware of further issues that have emerged from local authorities, and indeed the resources that I made available last week of £45 million were allocated with sufficient flexibility to enable local authorities to address these challenges. I think there are issues in the supply of some of the technology. That's why I was pleased that the Government acted so swiftly in the ordering of the 25,000 devices that we ordered last year, which were delivered before the start of the school term in August. I'm conscious that there are some local authorities who ordered later than the Government, and some of those orders have not been fulfilled because of the global pressure on device supply, which is quite understandable given the volume of digital connectivity. So the Government acted swiftly to identify volumes that were required and have delivered them, and we've provided additional financial support to local authorities to enable them to plug those gaps.
In order to get the rest of the questions, could I just ask for slightly shorter answers, please, Cabinet Secretary? Question 5, Edward Mountain.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on whether all children with learning disabilities in early years education are being identified and diagnosed to ensure that they receive targeted support.
Minister Marie Todd.
The Additional Support for Learning Act 2004 places duties on local authorities to identify, provide for and review the needs of all children with additional support needs in that area, including children in early learning and childcare. If a child does require support, that early learning and childcare providers should help explore the reason for this and provide them with the support they need as early as possible. In their inspections of ELC settings, the Care Inspectorate inspect the quality of care and support to ensure that all children receive the support that they need to achieve their full potential. And as part of our ELC expansion programme, all settings delivering the 1140 funded hours will be required to achieve good or better on all Care Inspectorate inspection themes.
Edward Mountain.
Whilst I note the Minister's response, NHS Highland have confirmed that on the 16th of December 2020, 463 children are on the waiting list for neurodevelopmental assessment, with a waiting time of 18 months. These children just simply cannot be getting the best educational start in life that they should be. Therefore, Minister, can you confirm what actions are being taken to ensure children in this position will receive an appointment as quickly as possible to fully assess the additional support needs they obviously require?
Minister.
We acknowledge the obvious operational difficulties that the child and adolescent mental health services may be having due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the associated restrictions. And whilst boards have responded very creatively to continue to treat significant numbers of children and young people, their priority has been to ensure that emergency and urgent cases are seen. And that means that, regrettably, some people have had to wait longer. CAMHS are now working hard to return to previous activity levels and to deal with any backlogs that have been developed. And we see this in the most recent waiting time figure. So CAMHS activity is higher now than in the same period last year. Boards also increased access to CAMHS services online, and CAMHS are now the largest mental health user of NHS Scotland's video conferencing platform, NHS Near Me. And I know that Sir Edward Mountain will welcome that, knowing the Highland connection with that particular platform's development. It is really important to stress that children do not need a formal assessment or diagnosis to access additional support for learning. Where a child is identified as requiring extra support through practitioners' observations or conversations with parents or carers, support should be put in place immediately, even if the underlying reasons for this are still uncertain.
Question 6, Claudia Beamish.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to Teach the Future's call for a review into how the whole of the formal education system is preparing students for a climate emergency and ecological crisis.
Cabinet Secretary.
President Officer, I've previously met with representatives from the Teach the Future Scotland campaign to listen to their experiences of climate education. We are supporting education around the twin global climate and ecological crises through the implementation of our Learning for Sustainability Action Plan, which provides a very positive context to address climate education. We're always looking to strengthen and improve practice. With this in mind, the Scottish Government is currently considering its detailed response to all asks of the Teach the Future Scotland campaign, and we will respond to the campaign representatives very shortly.
Claudia Beamish.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that welcome response. I too have met with Teach the Future representatives virtually, and I wanted to highlight particularly in this context the importance of, that they stressed to me, of one of their asks for initial teacher training and possibly even a new professional teaching qualification to help ensure the skills for the future innovation are developed for education in our climate and nature emergencies. And I wonder what the Cabinet Secretary, if he has a view on that.
Cabinet Secretary.
President Officer, there's a range of issues that have been raised by Teach the Future Scotland around initial teacher education, around curriculum content, around assessment, and all of these issues are being actively explored by the Government. I think it is absolutely essential, and it's one of the foundations of Scotland's curriculum, that we properly equip young people to address the challenges of our days and of the future. And the contribution from Teach the Future Scotland will be very influential in how we take these issues forward in the years to come.
Question 7, Alistair Allen.
To ask the Scottish Government how it has been engaging with Gaelic-speaking communities on the future.
I think that question was on the future of the language, Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government is committed to ongoing development of the Gaelic language. Our engagement with Gaelic-speaking communities is essential to this, and in October I initiated 2 consultation events with representatives of various island communities to hear from them about how they feel their communities could be supported to ensure that the Gaelic language thrives. I held a gathering of Gaelic interested individuals on the 17th of December to consider next steps, and we will meet again on the 1st of February.
Alistair Allen.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer and for his ongoing engagement and commitment to this issue. As we will hear at next week's meeting, there is a good degree of consensus on the existential threat facing Gaelic in some communities. I think we're also fortunate that there is a broad degree of support across this Parliament for supporting the language. What consideration is being given to putting new emphasis on development of the language at the community level?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I very much welcome the engagement in this debate that has been taken forward by Dr Allen in advancing his own concerns and aspirations around the Gaelic language. And I'm appreciative to Dr Allen and to a number of other parliamentary colleagues, Donald Cameron, Rhoda Grant, John Finney, and also Willie Rennie for their engagement in the Gaelic gathering, and also to the Finance Secretary, Kate Forbes, for her sustained interest. The focus of much of our thinking, I think, has recognised that there are many aspects that are going well in the Gaelic language around digital, around broadcasting, around Gaelic medium education. But the area that is finding it tough is the areas around the support for the vernacular communities. So I'm looking very carefully at what more we can do to support the vernacular communities in the development of the Gaelic language, and to make sure that there is a strong and nurturing environment to increase participation. And we can reflect on some of these issues in our discussion on Monday.
And question 8, Alexander Burnett.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what additional support is being provided to teachers to support pupils with additional needs.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government has prioritised the needs of vulnerable pupils, including those with additional support needs, as part of our response to COVID-19. While schools remain closed for the majority of pupils, our guidance for the return to schools in January asked that schools remain open for vulnerable pupils and children of key workers. This means that some pupils with additional support needs will be learning in school. There is a wide range of guidance available to aid school staff in supporting children and young people with additional support needs, including guidance on specific topics such as autism and dyslexia.
Alexander Burnett.
I can thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Now, last week it was reported in the Herald that a survey by EIS Teachers Union found that almost 80% of members believe additional support needs provisions in their school is inadequate. And it was reported that there has been an erosion in the number of people with qualifications for additional support needs. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what measures, funding and support is being committed to combat this specific shortage?
Cabinet Secretary.
President Officer, there are two elements to the answer that are necessary to Mr Burnett's question. The first is in relation to the application of the principle of mainstreaming, where we have, as an education system and indeed as a parliament, supported the principle of the provision of additional support needs education primarily through the mainstream education system. That means that most staff have to be familiar with the challenges and issues that will emerge in relation to the support of young people with additional support needs. And I'm very confident that those skills exist in schools the length and breadth of the country, where staff are working very hard to meet the needs of individual young people. The second aspect is, of course, where there is specialist provision. And it is important that that specialist provision, which I think operates to a very high standard and which is, of course, the subject of regular inspection, is able to meet the more complex needs of children and young people. And I would assure Mr Burnett that the resourcing and the staffing of these schools is undertaken in a fashion that is designed to meet the needs of individual children and young people. So we are focused both in the mainstream and in the special school environment on making sure that we address the needs and the aspirations of every single child. That is our duty, and that is what we must concentrate on ensuring is the case.
And a brief supplementary from Mr Finlay. Your persistence has paid off.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. A number of teachers are assisted by additional support needs assistants who work very closely on a one-to-one basis with children with additional needs. They are finding it extremely difficult to distance from the pupils that they work with very closely, and are asking if they can be a priority for the vaccine.
Cabinet Secretary.
As I indicated, that we are actively working to include the very critical staff that Neil Finlay referred to within the health and social care grouping of staff within our system. In many circumstances, staff will be carrying out in an education setting tasks that will be akin to health and social care support, and we are actively exploring how that approach can be taken forward to make sure staff can continue to do the very important work to which I know they are very committed.
Thank you. That concludes questions on education and skills, and shortly we'll go on to the next item of business. Thank you very much.